Hi everyone. My name is Kwatmi, popularly known as Tyron. I'm a product designer, and I'm still learning how to design buttons on Figma. Anyways, we're generally going to be talking about design and inclusivity, and generally centered around accessibility, right? So, for the purpose of this class, I think I'm just go or this session, whatever, man. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. In case you see my message with my girlfriend, please close your eyes. It's not that deep and all that. So yeah, just give me a minute, please. I'm just trying to shut down apps that I don't need. Okay, so I hope we can all see my screen, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now think for a minute for just a few seconds if you've come across like amazing designs, but you're sure that nobody can use this at the moment, or you're sure that nobody would be able to use it. Think about that beautiful nonsense you've seen one time, or think about that beautiful product that nobody can use, right? And think about either the success that the product would have gotten, or generally the failure that the project or product has been able to achieve, simply because it's difficult or people find it very hard to use, right? Now, if you have an example, you can just drop it in the chat or something. I think it will just help this to be as interactive as possible, and we can just proceed. So, anyone, you have like a product you've seen before, drop it in the chat since the mic is not enabled for everyone. Someone can just help me. Someone that has like a host feature or can speak can just help me read it, just so I don't have to switch between the call and the chat. So, yeah.
For me, I added one already. That's MTN app. So annoying.
Okay.
I wish I don't have to use it.
Okay. Yes, I think I get the MTN app problem. It's horrible and confusing to a large extent. Anybody has like any other app or product, or and it doesn't have to be a digital thing. It could be a kitchen utensil. It could be a car feature, or just generally anything. Anyone?
Yeah, someone said government apps.
In Nigeria, yes. Not outside Nigeria, but in Nigeria, I agree. Or in most African countries, I can easily agree with that. When you look at like government products and stuff like that, they're terrible. Who else? Or that's all. I mean, feel free. It could be anything. Like it could be one spoon that you bought, or one time that you went to Mama Put and you were supposed to use your hand, and you don't think that that's something you should have used or something. It could be anything. Anyone, or that's all.
Yeah, that's all for now.
Oh, all right, cool. So if you look at this image, right, and I'm going to come back to the examples we gave and why they matter. But if you look at this particular image, right, what do we think first is wrong with the image? You can type it in the chat. You can speak out if you have your speakers in the mic enabled and stuff like that. But generally, what do we think is? And if you think nothing is wrong with the image, just type in the chat. You think nothing is
Yeah,
wrong.
someone says no ramp.
Know what?
Ramp, RAMP.
Okay. What else?
Poor accessibility.
What does that mean?
That's a designer.
But then the person that says, "Oh,
Yeah.
no ramp," I mean, you can see that there's a ramp here now. So I mean, where is it?
Person says no slope for wheelchair.
But I mean, that's what is here. Abi, where my mouse is basically just pointing
So,
at.
yes.
That's
So someone says there's steps and slope combined.
exactly. That's basically the problem of the image, right? Because what happens here is you're designing this for people that are using wheelchair, right? So the stairs is not necessary, right? And it also means that the steps would prevent the person from actually the more like it would prevent wheelchairs from going through it at some point, because they would be able to go through the slope or the incline, but they would get to a point where they wouldn't be able to. So they are stuck almost at their destination or at the end of the slope or the ramp, because generally the designers decided to add space, sorry, steps, right? So it seems we somehow, right, already have an idea of what accessibility is, or it is something as individuals we struggle with on a day-to-day basis, or we have encountered at one point in time or the other. Even if you don't struggle with it, you've come across one oops in design that feels like this should have been done better. And I mean, it is mostly mistaken for usability, but they are two different things. Because usability is users' ability, accessibility generally is accessibility, if we would put it that way. To make it short, some designers call it A11Y, right? And basically, what it means is it's just saying A all the way to Y. So from A to Y, there are 11 things you have to consider or more when you're designing to be able to make it accessible. That's one of the things. But generally speaking, what accessibility is and what it's not, right? It basically just refers to a practice of creating products, either digital or physical or environmental, right? That can be used and understood by everyone. And what that basically means is that it includes almost every context for users, ranging from visual impairment to physical disability or almost any form of disability, including, not limited to, but including sleep deprivation for people that have insomnia, right? And some of these things basically have an impact of how we interact with the world or how we view certain things, right? Another definition basically is just the concepts of whether product or a service can be used by everyone, however they encounter it, right? Now, this however they encounter it is takes us back to here, right? Because it means that the user here is supposed to just be able to stop, but then it's limiting. And then for someone that does not have any form of disability and does not need a wheelchair, then you have to navigate between this and this. The slope makes it difficult to climb, the steps makes it easier to climb. So if you started with the steps, then you're bothered with the slope. If you're disabled and you're using wheelchair, then you're interrupted halfway, right? So it's just designing products for people, and service, like basically designing products or services for people, however they encounter it. One of my first lessons to accessibility, I still remember clearly, was a bathroom tap. I saw one time we traveled like that, and generally there's no on and off switch anywhere on it. It uses motion sensor, but the motion sensor is not on the body of the tap. It is on the right side of this of the sink, and it's just like a button, so you have to hover on it. It took me nearly 5 minutes to figure out that that was what I needed to do, and I did not figure it out because I figured it out. I figured it out because somebody came in to use it, and then I saw what they did, so I just copied them, and that's how I figured out that, oh, that's how to turn it off and turn it on, right? But think about how many times we build products over time that goes against a whole lot of accessibility features, right? Think about why it's messy most times when you're looking at um, captions, and including like captions on Netflix, or when you're looking at the movie progress indicator on Netflix. Sometimes the captions go behind the progress indicator depending on the size of your screen and stuff. Anyone has encountered that before? Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I have.
Yeah,
It's
so sometimes it just goes behind. Sometimes the colors on the video you're watching basically blend in with the captions, and then it becomes difficult to even read what is written on the screen in the name of captions, right? We see that a lot with short form content on social media, say TikTok or Reels on IG or Shorts on YouTube, right? You see people creating content, and sometimes the colors within the background just blends, or it's just so close to the color of the text, or the contrast is just so poor that it is difficult to read or to see what is on screen, right? Now, why this generally matters is because as designers, we're building products for or services for companies, for individuals, for businesses, and we're putting them out there. But one of the things that makes it important again is that there are laws guiding accessibility. And I remember in 2014 or in 2016, someone sued Netflix. The person is has a visual problem, paid for Netflix subscription, and basically found it very difficult to navigate the platform after paying for the subscription. And he took the case to court. He won because, I mean, there are web accessibility guidelines and there are global standards for accessibility and all. Netflix lost the lawsuit and paid heavily in compensation simply because one user paid, if we're looking at it in naira at that time, one user probably paid way less than 3,000 naira and found it very difficult, and all of a sudden took the company to court because he can, and there are laws that allows him to do so. He won the lawsuit, and the company paid heavily in compensations. But beyond the fact that you're scared of lawsuits as a designer, you also should be scared of the number of users that your product is going to lose. Now, if not for the fact that you are able to use, or people are able to use, let's say MTN without the mobile app, you can still use the same. You could load recharge card without using the mobile app. You could buy data without using the mobile app. You can call people without using the mobile app. There's every possibility that over time people would drop using MTN, or they would lose a significant number of users simply because everything that you have to do on, let's say, MTN as a product or as a service happens on their mobile app, and all of a sudden the mobile app has poor color contrast and visuals, because it's extremely difficult to see some of the text written on that mobile app. I've used it a couple of times. I just had to delete it, right? And you also have to understand that not everybody has a good sight. It could be a visual problem, it could be a cognitive problem, it could be a locomotive problem. So, for example, for seniors, if you're designing for people, say above 60, um, mostly their legs are becoming weaker. Generally, their bones are no longer as strong as they used to be, and it means that they are most likely going to have some form of locomotive disability. So, what that means when they are using your product or services or mobile app, especially one that requires them to use it while working, or one whose context is majorly centered around day-to-day usage while you're doing your everyday work and everyday life, there's every possibility that because their legs are no longer strong, their body is going to be a little bit shaky while they are working. It might not be too visible, but their hands and eyes would see it when they are working, because obviously it means the phones or tablet or PC is not going to be all that stable. Now, if the font size on the screen is not legible enough, it becomes difficult for them to see it because it's small. They most likely have visual issues. But even if they don't have visual issues, because of the nature of their body makeup and composition, the phone is a little bit shaky in their hands and it's difficult for them to see small text because it's it's moving around. And it's also part of the reason why you realize that most people above 60, I don't know about you, but most people above 60, if you've ever held any of their phones, you realize that the font sizes that they are using is extremely big, right? I don't know if you've experienced that before. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, sure. Like I need some form of feedback to know that I'm not talking to myself, right?
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And I
Okay,
mean, if you can enable the mic for people, please enable the mic. Let them talk and let's
okay.
get
Yeah.
stuff. Just that we can just be careful with noise around us. If you're not talking, please mute. But if you need to respond, let this be as interactive as possible. It just looks like I'm talking to myself, and I want to be able to know if people are getting me or people have questions while I'm talking, or what I'm saying does not make sense, and you want to ask for clarity or clarifications or something. So yeah, I mean that should work for us. So if you can, please, it would be great. All right, out there. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. I
All
don't know
right.
for the others.
Oh, okay. Please, if you can hear me, just respond so we know everyone is here. And then, I mean, ask questions, respond where I need some form of feedback to know that we're still following and it's making sense, right? So yeah, so let me just continue. Like I was saying, like you realize that most seniors or most people above 60 or a certain age already move the contrast, sorry, the font sizes on their phones. They take it like to the highest number or to a very very high number that most young people are going to consider as being too bold or being too large for their screens, right? And the reason why they do that is because it comes with age and body composition. Some it's a visual problem that they have, some it's generally just their body becoming weaker and they find it difficult to hold certain things as steady or as still as possible. So it means their hands are a little bit shaky and they need the fonts to be big so they don't lose track of it. So there are different abilities to users and all of that, and different environments. Because sometimes even with the perfect body composition or perfectly healthy body without any form of disability, you would still need products designed properly so you could be able to see it. If you tried the beta test of the new Apple's UI, who has tried that, please? The new liquid glass. Hello.
Some accessibility problems as far as the beta is concerned.
Come again?
Yeah, it has some accessibility problems. So the UI is like a little bit transparent and you can see the background simultaneously. So it's very
Yeah,
difficult to, navigate through it.
yeah, exactly. Especially when you're using a picture or a background, or your
Yeah,
phone's theme is in light mode, right?
yeah, yes.
Exactly. So you just realize that it just becomes extremely difficult. Even with the current iOS 18, if you switch to white, like light mode, and put a white background on your iPhone, it still becomes messy. Even with the current iOS 18, like it's generally just messy. But then the idea is for us to understand that even with the perfect health condition or without any form of disability, accessibility is also important for all users, right? And it's not just for people with disability. Now, some of the common types of like accessibility problems you'd most likely see are either visual, which has to do with like some form of either visual impairment or generally just poorly designed due to color contrast or the size in terms of text legibility, or generally in terms of their colors, right? They're not bold enough, or they are too light, or they are too small, or they are too big, right? All of this could constitute to one form of accessibility issues or the other for the users. There's also motor or mobility. This generally has to do with people working, right? And all. And certain products, depending on where you are and your experience, certain products are designed to accommodate people that have one form of locomotive problem or the other. A clear example is what we saw at the beginning of um, this particular session, that there's a staircase that has like a ramp by the side, or an an entrance, a pathway on the entrance that is supposed to serve as your accessibility pathway, but for some weird reasons it was mixed with staircase, and it becomes extremely difficult for people with wheelchair to pass through those stairs, right? Because there are two stairs at the end of your journey. So it's always important to think from those perspectives. There are auditory problems when it comes to accessibility, and this just has to do with speech or hearing, especially for people that are deaf or dumb. Because if you look at today's world, we are going into more of conversational UI with how AI is being designed and built, right? And it also means that we need to be able to design products that are conversational enough to carry either the deaf, or generally to carry people that are dumb along. And if you don't design with that in mind, then there's every possibility that you would lose that market share, right? There are people with seizures as a disability. So think about people with epilepsy, and they have seizure attacks from time to time, right? There are also people with learning or cognitive disorders, right? And this basically has to do with maybe people that are dyslexic, or people that are generally just slow learners, or people that have stuff like ADHD, or just generally having some form of mental condition that makes it difficult to either focus or to learn at a normal pace or normal speed, or at the conventional method of learning for most people, right? Those are the people you'd consider when you're thinking of these are the common accessibility problems. And when I'm designing, I'm looking for an approach to be able to solve or capture for most users within these groups, if not all, right? Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, there are cognitive learning disabilities, visual problems has to do with blindness, low vision, color blindness, and all that. Auditory has to do with either speech or hearing, and then we have the motor, or generally mobility. This has to just do with movement or one's locomotiveness. And then there are other forms of accessibility problems, but they are not so common, which is basically the incidental, like people with sleep deprivation. I have a very terrible insomnia. I'm barely able to sleep. And this is like personal for me, right? I'm barely able to sleep before 3 or 4 a.m. every day of my life, right? And it has an impact on how I approach designs, or how I approach products. Because at that point in time where I can't sleep and everybody's asleep, there has to be something that either aids my sleep, or basically aids my navigation of apps and stuff, because I'm hypersensitive at that point in time. I can easily get annoyed or paranoid, and I'm generally just everywhere. And it means I find it very difficult to wake up early, or I don't wake up early until probably like 9, 10 a.m. and stuff. For those that have called me before 9 a.m., this is a little info, right? So we also have like the environmental, where it is contextual now, right? And an example is when you're using a mobile device underground, and think of swimmers, for example, or deep sea divers, right? Or generally people that do some form of work, like those on mining sites that have to do some form of work underground, or probably even just contextual environmental stuff that has to do with maybe, let's say, runners or people that are cyclists or some form of sports or the other. You have to be able to design in such a way that someone that is, while someone is still running, he can still be able to probably lift his arm and still see notifications from his fitness tracking device, right? Or someone that is cycling on a bicycle could still be able to track the number of times he has cycled on the bicycle pedal, or whatever it is that they're trying to track and all that. The same thing will happen. People happen like, oh, this person goes to the gym and stuff. And again, you think about it, not just the products in terms of like mobile apps or digital products, but it also has to do with every equipment that is designed, even within the gym, right? Because I mean, someone who is a product designer in that industry is responsible for designing the dumbbell, is responsible for designing bench press, is basically responsible for designing, let's say, treadmills and stuff. And you have to be able to put it in such a way that it is accessible for users in that particular scenario environment. It is also one of the reasons why, if you look at like treadmills, for example, buttons are just big, writings are just so big on the treadmill, just to be able to allow you click on them even while you're running. People have different thumb sizes, so you'd want to ensure that all buttons are big enough for different thumb sizes within the gym. But at the same time, it is that while they're still running, they can still put their hand around this large space of a button and click on it and either slow down or increase their pace or generally just stop. Right? So think about environments when you're designing products also. One of the shittiest environmental designs for products is what happens on cars. If you drive, I promise you, you probably have no idea what a lot of things or a lot of icons mean when you're driving a car. Maybe I'm the only one, right? But how many of us have found it extremely difficult to understand what some icons mean within a particular car because there's nothing really informing you what they do? Anyone?
especially the touchscreen. So yeah, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, sure. And we have that even on manual cars also. Like even when it's not a touchscreen, even on manual cars, you realize that there are certain indicators or certain icons that to this, even after years of driving, you still have no idea what they do because you barely use them. Right? So but then they are useful for people that make use of them, but it's just that it's not common knowledge, and I mean it's poor design at some point and stuff, right? Now, someone once said, when UX does not consider all users, shouldn't it be known as some users rather than some user experience, which is shush, right? Rather than calling it user experience, which more often than not I agree with, right? Because I've worked with companies and products where the reason why company was losing customers was not because people do not like the product, but generally because they were badly designed in terms of accessibility, right? They were poorly designed, and it is extremely difficult for people to understand what's happening here or to see what's going on there and stuff like that. This is a perfect example of how colors or contrast basically plays a huge role in accessibility, right? Because when you think about it from this particular perspective, now we're coming back to UI a little bit. When you think about it from this particular perspective, you realize that the users looking at the design with high contrast understand what's happening, while those with low contrast find it very difficult to get what it's saying. A perfect example is flyers for political campaigns in Nigeria, right? Or when you see, just like someone mentioned earlier, government websites or government contracted products, more often than not, they are poorly designed and it mostly has one form of visual impairment or the other. It's similar to the example I give people a lot that maybe the reason why we have a lot of people um, failing jam or submitting jam generally, you just realize that during their exams, they submit unintentionally, or we just have one form of problem or the other with the software. Some could be an accessibility problem because a whole lot of these users are not considered, right? An example I give over and over again is I've had this conversation with people that work in Germany. How do you navigate around students that are blind that need to write the exams and make it to tertiary institution? I don't know about any of you, but has anyone been in a class in a conventional university in Nigeria with a blind person? Anyone?
Yeah, yeah, that was that. I can't really remember the details, but then I remember they use some um, aids for their listening and for other stuff. But I can't really remember the details anymore.
For a
But I know
blind
they
person,
used
not
to.
a deaf person. We're talking about a blind person. Have you been in class? You say in
No,
a
no, no,
class
no, no, no,
with
no,
the blind
no.
person. This basically brings it to also it means that the system of education we have, for example, is not accessible as such, because it means that people who are blind would find it difficult to write the exams required to make it to conventional universities. It means that they are unable to sit in class nor write exams because I have never I schooled in Bauchi, right? And I've never at any point in time encountered any blind person in any of the tertiary institutions within Bauchi. That is not necessarily a special school. And most of the special schools that we have for people with visual problems, for example, is not necessarily a university per se where they go to class, sit, attend lectures, write exams, and come out with a degree, for example, right? So it basically means we have now outside UI, we have like a poor educational system that does not cater for the needs of those that are blind. But then, even for people who can see, I've been in class with people with certain visual impairments that need glasses, either sight, they are long sighted or they are short sighted, and I see them struggle during exams. Right? For those that are long sighted, you realize they are struggling to push papers away from them. For those that are short sighted, you realize their face is all in their paper and they're trying to understand what was written there before they are able to read and also just write and sit for their exams properly. So it means there's a whole lot of industry that, or there are a lot of industries that we could cater for and ensure that things are done better just to be able to fit the context of the users that we have within that particular industry. But then in UI, think about it as majorly a thing around contrast or button positioning. The same thing with when you're uploading images, it's super important to just use alternative text. And I'm sure we see that a lot and we ignore it. But alt text is a huge thing because there are blind users or just visually impaired users that are making use of screen readers. So when you put an image and you don't properly label or give it an alt text, what happens is their screen reader, and I mean, their screen reader just probably reads it as image2.png and moves on rather than a proper description of what the image is and what it's doing. And it doesn't have to be an entire paragraph, it's just something that makes sense when you hear of it. Because even without looking, if I tell you someone is holding wine with his red, it's red wine with his right hand and it's in a glass, it makes sense than saying, oh, there's someone holding wine and you're not sure if it's the wine in a bottle or is it in a glass, right? If it is in a bottle, is the bottle open or not? If it is in a glass, is it a wine glass or a champagne glass or a beer mug, right? And it's just generally how some of these things are for a lot of people, and it may not look like a lot of problem for you when you have like maybe you've never encountered something that has like it's poorly designed for accessibility, so it feels normal. Until you use screen readers, you'll not understand why all texts are important, for example. Or when you strip off the JavaScript of a particular page and you strip off the styling in terms of CSS, or disable images because of internet connection. Say you're somewhere remotely in Plateau State that internet is not up to 3G or not more than 3G, and you're finding it difficult to load images in a website, and you decided that, you know what, let me strip off all the images on this website, let me strip off all the animations, and basically just read through the text and alt text within the website, and you just realize that it doesn't make sense anymore, simply because the visuals are out are off, and you cannot make sense of the places where there are images or what the image is all about, right? So all texts are extremely important for people with screen readers, right? Or people with visual, some form of visual impairment that need to make use of a screen reader. It's the same thing that is happening here. And it's not just about color contrast also, but also about color contrast with an intent for hierarchy, right? Color contrast with an intent for hierarchy. And the reason is because we do this a whole lot of times. Is that correct? This particular design where we have the cancel button with red, and at the same time the sign up button or whatever action button we have, it's done in green. I'm sure most of us have done that before, right?
Yeah, that's like the default.
Yeah, but I mean that's a wrong way to
Yeah,
put it.
yeah.
Right, because what happens in this case is that you are indicating that they are both primary actions, right? So by hierarchy, they they have the same hierarchy. If your goal for the users is for them to cancel, cancel should be the primary button, while sign up should be the secondary, right? Are we together?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, but again, this is how it happens when someone that has like a visual problem is looking at it. Because if he has a green color deficiency, then there's a problem, right? Because these particular options, this is what someone that has color blindness, right, is going to see. So when you put it as red and green side by side like this, when someone that has color blindness is looking at it, depending on the color blindness he has, is most likely going to be looking at it as this option, that where the cancel button is somewhat in a shade of brown, while you have this, like they are both shades of brown. One it's thicker than the other and all of that. One it's closer to green, is a greenish brown color, while this is leaning towards brown itself as a color, right? So you now realize that rather than see it as this, someone with color blindness will see it as this. And it's extremely important to think about these steps when you're thinking about like applying colors or making primary actions. When you do something like this, what happens is, even if they see sign up as this, they still see there's nobody that has any visual problem that is that makes it, unless they are blind, that they cannot see black or white. I've never encountered anyone, but black or white is one color that, regardless of visual problems, you would see them as they are, right? So it's just easier to have something like this where the person that has visual problem might not see green as green, he might see it as cream color, or you might see it as blue, right? And then basically place the other button in a black and white scenario, so you know that, okay, this is the primary action and this is the secondary action, rather than putting them side by side with colors, and he's looking at it as two different primary actions and not sure which is the action that he's supposed to perform. Do you want users to cancel or do you want users to sign up, right? So always think of that as something you need to consider. Just expanding and building more on some of the common usability problems. Low contrast can be a problem when you're looking at it from in terms of accessibility. Audio accessibility issues also could be a problem. I remember, I think a week ago or less than a week ago, WhatsApp was having a glitch where if you play any voice notes, it keeps breaking and there's a beep sound in between. Most times you have to close WhatsApp, like basically shut the app or close it, right? And then reopen it. And this time around, I'm not saying minimize it. I'm talking about quit, exit the app, shut it down completely, and then open it before the voice note starts playing properly. I also remember like, oh, WhatsApp had a similar issue at some point where you were seeing people's status, like you see a completely different name with the status of someone else on their name. Facebook had it one time where you are seeing a completely different name with a completely different profile picture. They were mixing people's profile pictures and stuff because there was a glitch on the platform, right? There's also multiple inputs because sometimes it could be a problem, right? You just realize that some apps are designed in such a way that you could either type or send voice notes, and both options are enabled at the same time. Like, oh, this person is still typing, but it's showing you an option to record a voice note, right? I don't know if you've encountered that before, but then again, this could also um, bring up a whole lot of accessibility issues. There's also responsiveness in design because I mean, imagine, for most of us that are in tertiary institutions in Nigeria, maybe now, our schools portals are beginning to become mobile responsive. But if you take it some few years ago, almost every school within Nigeria had a terrible portal that when you open it on your mobile device, it's just a mess and you're barely able to do anything. Anyone has encountered that before?
Yeah.
Which school? So that you have your school.
No, no, yeah, been please.
Okay, which school? But I mean, just for the purpose of this class.
Yeah, Adama State University.
Oh, okay. Okay. The one in where is it at self? Movie, right? Or
Yeah,
what's the name of?
movie.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Any other person has encountered like a responsive design problem before? You
Yeah,
load a website,
someone says ATBU in the sorry, someone says ATBU in the comment.
call them out, do it loud, right? But then generally, right, a whole lot of school portals in Nigeria. That's like a very perfect example when it comes to responsive design and accessibility issues. A lot of websites in Nigeria, especially school portals, are not responsive. You barely are able to view them on tablets. It's mostly mobile phones. Sorry, it's mostly web like on your desktop. The desktop self, you get how you would use a 13-inch PC and things are breaking already, right? So it's just super important to also understand that responsiveness could spring up some level of accessibility problems because the users at the other end of things are on that device for a reason. So there are users that probably find it difficult to use laptops or except you provide for them specially designed laptops for their case. And if your site is not responsive, then there's a problem. If it's not responsive to be on mobile or to be on tablet or iPad, it becomes a problem. There are users that are mostly default on PC and all that. And if you don't, as much as we're saying, oh, mobile first app, if you don't design for the web, then it becomes a problem, right? The same thing with mobility considerations, right? And this has to do with your ability to move and the method of movement, right? Some are using manual wheelchairs where they have to push it with their hands themselves. Some are using motorized systems where they don't have to. They basically just click on buttons and then it moves and stuff. Some basically are using crutches and to move. Some are generally just impaired and they don't even have access to any of these mobility devices. Some just have weaker bones as individuals and find it difficult to move. And it means that at every point in time, you need to be able to consider who your audience are, what their common problems are, and how do I fix it when building these designs. So it is not just about beautiful buttons, fine images, and the neatest UI you've seen before, which is the reason why there are companies you see that are big but don't necessarily you don't think that their visuals are all that great. But that mostly comes from there's a place of poor branding, but there's also a place where you understand who they are working with and that design approach just works for them, right? And then sometimes tutorial for new features can just be the accessibility problem because tell me why I need to watch a 30 minutes tutorial just to be able to understand how to use an everyday product. I'm not talking about specialized products like Figma or professional products like Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. I'm talking about day to day user apps. How many of us had to watch a tutorial before we started using, say, Facebook, or we started using WhatsApp? Anyone?
Never did. Never did.
Yes. And you realize that even the new features that WhatsApp is releasing right now, even before they introduced the WhatsApp status update, where when WhatsApp has a new update, you see it on your status feed, right? And you watch it as a video, um or you read it as some form of text when there's a new update. Even before that, you realize that for some weird reasons, you discovered some of these new features on your own while using the app. You just realized today that, oh, if you drag a message to the side, you can be able to just use it to reply. You don't have to click it and hold. You don't have to long press and then select reply. You could just drag to the left or to the right, and it enables the reply feature. It was something that most people randomly stumbled on, because at the point where they released that, they did not have the WhatsApp status release note or release feature, where they basically show you the list of new features that they are releasing from your status, and you could watch a video of how to use it. Most of us stumbled on it randomly, right? So always think about, like, when I'm designing a product, who are the people, who are the users, and why is it important for me not to use some of these users, or why it is important for the business to retain them. Your job as a designer is not to design the finest UI out there. And in case you are thinking that that's your job, you probably not have a job very soon. Your job as a designer is to design the products or the services of the business you're serving in such a way that the users of those business or services are able to use and enjoy using it. If your designs does not convert or make money for the business you're working for, so now later you're going to lose your job. So while there's a race among designers as to who is designing the best UI, which is good and it may get you gigs, in the grand scheme of things, you realize that some of these things don't necessarily matter if they don't align with the business, or they don't in some way bring new customers to the business. And then if you have to bring new customers to the business, then two major things you're going to pay attention to while doing designs is usability and accessibility. But it becomes crazier with accessibility because there are laws, and someone can sue your company, and your company is going to pay compensation for not following certain guidelines, right? One of the largest information source or source of truth for web accessibility is generally the World Web Consortium, which is the W3C. Or you could go through the Web Content Accessibility Guideline called WCAG, right? And it just gives you a summary of items that you need to pay attention to while thinking in terms of accessibility, right? The common and practical guidelines here is to ensure that while you're creating your personas, I'm sure that we're all familiar with creating personas, right? Or
Yeah,
do I
yeah,
need to explain
I
what
am.
personas?
I am.
Like, if you don't know what personas are, please just let us know. Just so if I need to explain it so you get the context, fine. If you know what personas are, we can just move. So, is there anyone that doesn't know what persona is?
I'll be looking up in the chats for any.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but so far no.
All right. So, generally, when you're creating personas, it means that what you should capture in your personas does not just apply to users with the perfect health condition or perfect abilities in terms of either sensory, cognitive, mobile, visual, or auditory. It means that you're also supposed to look at a diverse nature. And I'm sure that most of us probably never designed a persona where we are building, let's say, a fintech product, or we are building an edutech product, and one of the persons we are capturing in our personas is a deaf person or a blind person as part of, like, our users. Probably when we are doing user research, it's very possible that some of us even skip the blind or crippled or people with one form of disability or the other. That is is physical and we can see it. A lot of designers skip those users. And I get that they don't form a majority or they don't form a large number of users within most platforms, but they are also users at the end of the day. And one of the core things you have as a designer is empathy. And if you are to skip certain users simply because you don't think they will use the product, then I mean, where is empathy here, right? So you ought to think about it when you're creating personas. Please include people with one form of visual impairment or the other. If your personas are six, you could have two dedicated to maybe someone with a visual problem, someone with a locomotive problem, and whatnot, depending on the product you're building or the services you're trying to design for. Right? Are we together, guys?
Yes, yes, yes.
That's fair.
Okay, cool. Another thing is that when you're designing for all platforms and devices, you ought to capture from web down to mobile, right? And there are different screen sizes across board, and you need to ensure that, oh, my designs fit the context of these different screens and devices for my users. And why it's extremely important again is that it's not everybody that can be able to access or be able to use certain devices. Some are even on specialized devices that they use to be able to either access certain products or services. I have seen tweets and go through them, especially on X, formerly Twitter. There are a lot of users that are blind users and they basically just use screen readers and other assisted devices to stay on Twitter. They consume content, and at the same time, that's how they are able to tweet, right? How many of us have ever visited White House website?
I have.
Okay, you realize that I don't know if they removed it, but there used to be this large accessibility feature that they had by the side. Sorry, let me just stop sharing my screen and let me see. So that we get where I'm coming from, right? And I'm just trying to share this. I hope that they've not changed that particular feature, right? Uh, I think they. I'm coming. I think they have, right? But initially they used to have like a big button here where it listed all the accessibility features. You could move from small text to large text to, okay, let's do this. There's a website I know that has that, Pioneer. I'm hoping that they've also not removed it. These people want to embarrass me today, but no problems. Let's go to the sign up. I shall know it's somewhere on the website, right? Interesting. Pioneer has also removed that from their site. Okay, they haven't. They put together. Now, if you look at this particular place I clicked, right? Are we together? And we can still see my screen, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Just for us to give some context, these are basically the different user groups or categories or form of accessibility that this as an organization had to pay attention to, right? The name of the product is Userway. I think we've used it for one of the designs I was working on one time like that. They help you incorporate that into your website. But in case you want to, so the contrast profile, if you notice the design of the site has changed just to be able to accommodate. And this, for most of us, there's something wrong with this image, right? But there are people with certain visual problems that this image looks as normal as this to them. I don't know if you get, and that's how crazy the internet is. There are people whose eyes
Mm.
see this image, how we are seeing it normal. This is their view of how it is normal for them. But for you, this is abnormal. For them, it is normal. And if you notice, the moment we enable high contrast at level one, the design of the site has changed, even the colors, to accommodate the profile of someone that has a particular visual problem, who sees this the same way you would see the design in its original state. You can also invert and increase it to a dark contrast mode if you don't like the light mode, and you could still take it all the way up to the light mode, which removes most of the colors we have on the site. And then when you bring it back to normal, you now have this. There are people that navigate, that use voice navigation, which is what we have here. There are people that use screen readers. There are people that want smart contrast, right? There are people that will just come and say, well, highlight all the links for me because of one form of visual problem or the other. And this is basically how accessible this product can be for me, right? There are people that will come and say, whoop, I cannot see this text because of a visual problem and I want to increase the size. And you realize that, oh, our texts are becoming bigger and bigger on screen. This was not how it was before. When you take it back to normal, this is the normal size. But because someone comes and says, okay, make it bigger or make it a whole lot bigger, now this is looking like the size that my mother is going to use, right? So same thing happens with spacing. You can increase spacing all the way. You can pause every animation. You can decide to enable hide every image. And if you notice here, all of the images within the website, or most of the images, with the exceptions of the ones at the top, right? But images have been removed, and you could still decide to bring them back, and we have our images back. When you hide them, every image goes, right? There is a future for people that have dyslexia, right? And it is dyslexic friendly, right? You could enable a feature, you could enable to tooltip, um page structure, line height, text alignment. You could start up a dictionary, you could change the saturation of the site, right? And there are more features that have been hidden here, because from light to left and all of that, and you can reset all of this and come back to normal. But what I'm trying to explain here is that you ought to confirm the user persona and the platform or the kind of device that they're coming from, right? And some of these features automatically detect the settings on the person's device or the kind of device that is currently loading the site or the product, and automatically turn on features that would accommodate that particular user's need. So if you've not done any design that is accessible or has some level of accessibility friendliness, start to think about it from now, and the complexities involved for users within that category to access the products that you're building or designing for. If you've not been labeling your icons, especially on mobile, icons are generic. There's hardly any icon that is specific for one thing. Some people will use the home icon to represent a house when they are building, maybe let's say a house security system. Some will use it to represent home, which is like the index page of your dashboard. Some will use it to represent home, which is the index page of the app itself, and all of that, right? So they're not generic, and you ought to consider like doing stuff like that when you're working. Organize content in a very logical format. Very, very important. Visual hierarchy is important. Content hierarchy is important. May your body text and the titles no go dey fight for each other's attention, right? But then there should be proper spacing within your content, and at the same time, the titles or the body text should be well differentiated from every other one, right? The same thing with design. Ensure consistency just to avoid confusion and other accessibility prone issues. If your layout looks different, it means that somebody will jump on the site, goes to a new page, and all of a sudden they are confused if they are still on the same product, or they've changed from one place. That's one of the reasons why if WhatsApp is open on someone's phone, from a distance you can tell that this is WhatsApp. From a distance you can tell that this is IG. From a distance you can tell that that's Facebook. From a distance you can tell that that's Twitter or X, right? Whole lot of other sites that ensure that level of consistency across their products. So when you're designing, don't bobo it. It's not all about making it look fine, but when you're making it look fine, let it be consistent, but also ensure that it works, right? Use accessible fonts. That one, let me see if I have it. Okay. I don't know if any of us have seen this example of I love you versus I love you when you're writing a particular stuff online. You just realize that somebody writes I love you, it's in red and it's stylish, it looks cool. And the same I love you, maybe in a particular format, looks like it is a threat and the person is going to look for it to kill you. Have we ever come across something like that before?
Yeah, I have. I think the one you're mentioning is looking like maybe this gothic kind of font or so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have.
The rest are not talking. So it looks like I'm talking to one person. But anyways, right? That's basically what it does. And make sure that they're accessible, make sure they are legible enough, and make sure you have the proper license or authorization to use a particular font. Don't just go and download any font and use it for commercial purpose. The owners can sue you. Facebook has encountered that at some point. It was a font that they could have gotten the enterprise version for well below $150 at that time, or probably below $100 at that time, but they didn't. And somehow the designers basically just downloaded it and started using it until I think which year was it, around 2017 or so, or 2016, where they were slammed with a lawsuit and they had to pay in compensation like millions of dollars for using a particular font simply because they did not have the copyright license and stuff. So again, even besides just picking an accessible font, make sure that you have the proper license, because your business can be hit with a lawsuit for just downloading fonts wey no be your own. For some of us that are good at grabbing fonts, this is for you, right? The same thing with color contrast. We've talked about color contrast initially. The same thing with alt text for images and media content, right? Provide transcriptions and subtitles if you're doing videos, or even for audio messages and stuff. Avoid excessive animation. I know it's fine when you do it and when it is loading, it does this, it does that. But there's a reason why some of the big dogs in the tech ecosystem, or in terms of like basically when you look at the top 5 or 6 tech companies in the world, there's a reason why their products don't have so much animations around, right? Think Apple, think Facebook, think Google, think Amazon, think um, Netflix. These companies, most of their products do not have excessive animation scattered around. Some don't even have animations. It's just a scroll effect and the page is just plain and there's barely any animation. Maybe a video, a media file, but not necessarily some form of animation. But for some of us, we want buttons that when you click on it, it's going like a liquid effect that will fade from left to right. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying if this does not increase or improve user retention, like it's not necessarily if a it's just a nice to feature, but not so important. And some of those animations can be distracting for users, because rather than do what they are supposed to do on the app, they may get lost just playing around with the button. I don't know about you, but I've visited websites where the first 5 minutes I spent was just basically playing around with the animations on the website. Has anybody ever encountered a website like that?
So
Anyone?
there was this very very fun portfolio that was flying around X a while ago. I mean, some years back though. I know I didn't bother to check the project on that portfolio. I just played the game. It was like a game kind of environment. I just played through, and then when I was done, I went out.
But guess the thing, you don't remember the portfolio nor the person's project, but you remember you played the game, Sha, right? Now, what
Yeah,
that means is
yeah,
that
yeah.
the actual reason you went there as a designer or as a person was basically to check out, oh, the kind of projects they've done in the past. But somehow, in an effort to quote unquote gamify their portfolio, it became so good at gamifying the portfolio that people. So imagine that you're a recruiter, right? and your goal was to look at previous projects that this person has done, only for you to get there and realize that you played the game and you forgot to look at the person's portfolio, and you went on to look at other people's portfolio. And it's very possible that that person is a good designer, but just that there was excessive animations that distracted the recruiter, that made it so much so that the only thing they could think about when they got to the site was to play the game, and when they were done they leave, right? So excessive animations could also affect your product, right? Use meaningful anchor text, very important. Proper headings and HTML tag if you write code, but also ensure that you use proper headings, and the description should, or the headings should give some form of basic description about the text beneath, right? To ensure that when people are reading, they get full context. And most times on websites, depending on the kind of products you're building, people just read the headings and maybe the first line in the body of text, and they try to make sense of it, because in most cases, most users from different products we've tested in the past, most users don't have the time to read all the text that is on your website. They just read a few things to make sense out of what you're trying to communicate, and they make their decision, or they pass a judgment on the product based on the little pieces of informations, images, and little animations that they've seen. Good designs are perceived to work better, or to work better, like they are perceived to work better than stuffs that are poorly designed. So keep it simple, but ensure that it is beautiful, right? Make it screen reader friendly. Include keyboard shortcuts if you have to. Use accessibility tools. If you're on Figma, one of my there are a couple of accessibility plugins on Figma, right? But there are also websites where you could pass product as an accessibility checker, where you basically just submit maybe the URL of your site, or you download it as a plugin on Chrome to use it as an accessibility tool to just check the accessibility of a particular product, just so you know if it is accessible enough or not, right? And then test with different users in different categories. Now, design is everywhere, from the dresses you wear, and that's one of the reasons why my focus was not just on digital products, to the smartphones you use, and the PC you're on right now, or the smartphone you're using to join this call, right? They're all design, right? The chair you're sitting down on, or the car you're in, or um, wherever it is you're seated or standing, someone designed it, down to the building that you live in, right? Someone designed it, and when they are done poorly, it is a pain for you. When they are done right, you enjoy them so much so that you don't even know that they are there. I promise you, you may not necessarily get how difficult it is to get into your house until a day that someone switches, even if it is the direction of the lock. If you were used to locking your house clockwise, and then all of a sudden something happens, you change the locks, and now the lock is anti-clockwise, it becomes a pain for you every time, because when you want to lock the door, you just start going clockwise. And what that is doing, it's now opening the door rather than closing it as you were used to, right? And then when you come to open the door, instead of going clockwise, you now start going anti-clockwise, because your mental model is used to that as the most appropriate way to open or to close the door, right? So when they are done right, people may even ignore or forget or not even know it exists. When they are done poorly, it becomes a pain, right? I remember that time, a long time ago, right, when Microsoft tried to work on phones, right? The Windows phone was a badly designed phone that navigating around it, especially when they made it have the skin of, when I think was it Windows 8? I be Windows 7. Yeah, it had the skin of Windows 7. For those of us that remember that time, right? It was extremely difficult for people to navigate. A lot of people got tired and started selling the phone. I mean, and it could be associated to one of the reasons why the product never really succeeded in the market, because navigation was extremely difficult. I still remember, even when Windows 7 and Windows 8 were a thing. Was it Windows 8? I be Windows 11. Windows 11 was a thing. I remember navigation was a pain for people, because they brought the whole um their gallery layout for the menu and all that, and it was just a mess, and it became difficult to navigate around. People got used to it over time anyways, but it led to the failure of some of the products that Microsoft built around that skin at that point in time, right? And for every product you build, think, who are the users? Think, does this boy who is coming from a typical village background, for example in Nigeria, would he or she be able to make use of this CBT software that we are trying to introduce to Jam, right? I've argued that the problem with Lagos traffic is not that there are no new roads. It's just that the new roads are not accessible enough. Are those roads good? Yes. But why do I need to follow a new road that is going to take me 30 minutes to get to my destination when the road I'm used to takes me 10 minutes, right? And even with the traffic of the road I'm used to, I would arrive in 15 or 20 minutes. I can endure 10 minutes of traffic and still get to my destination 10 minutes earlier. So sometimes when you're faced with certain problems as a designer or when you're building a product for people and you're getting certain feedback, sometimes the feedback is not necessarily a complete design overhaul, right? Sometimes it could just be to fix some of the little UX issues or accessibility issues here and there, sprinkled here and there within the product to ensure that users are able to navigate more accurately or properly, right? Because if the blind person is dropping from your platform, it's not because it was not well designed, it's just that it was not designed for them. If the visually impaired person is dropping off from your platform, it's not because you did not design the nicest UI ever in the history of UI design, but it's just because the colors are confusing because of their visual problem, and they cannot make use of it as appropriate as they should, right? So sometimes common mistakes that people make when they are building or when they are taking actions within platforms, it's not because they want to make those mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes come from poorly designed interface that have poor accessibility and it becomes difficult for users. Hence, it leads users to make more mistakes. Placing buttons appropriately, labeling them properly, having proper alternative text, using the right colors, using the right contrast, using the right hierarchy, understanding that they are on screen users, and all of those basically come in together to form a product that is usable and at the same time accessible for a vast majority of users. So when you're building your product, do your research, understand the user the target audience and some of your extreme users, and design in such a way that tailors or caters for their needs. I don't know if anyone has any question or any confusion or something you want to add or contribute to so far. Anyone?
Yeah. So I think anyone that has any question or need clarification, you could just maybe indicate. I mean, you can speak if you already have access. I'm trying to just give access to speak to everyone. If you have, you could just maybe raise your hand and then speak, or put it up on the chat if you are shy. Shyness should be an accessibility issue too.
I don't think you should, as a designer, because you talk and defend your design every time. But okay,
Yeah, so if you have questions, or I mean, or maybe you want to just speak to something you learned, or I mean, so Paul knows that you really followed anyone's. Okay, I can see someone requesting. Let me just give you access. Where's the name? Okay, yeah. So I think you can speak. Um, you can just unmute and speak. Is that black? That's BLVCK designer. You can unmute. You should be able to unmute. You should see that somewhere at the base of your screen if it's not accessibility issue here now.
I
But I think it's
mean,
easy to get
it could be.
because I know a lot of people complain about using this platform though. But if you can't find that, you can just put it in the comment section.
Well,
It's
I
black,
mean,
but I mean you're able
for
to.
a moment, I had to spend some time to figure. I was looking for where the mic was initially. And then I was like, oh, found
Oh,
it.
imagine, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it happens. So any questions so far? Like you could type it.
Yeah,
You
I mean, I'm not seeing any. I'm still expecting anyone to bring it up. Yeah, but I think if I would want to maybe give a comment, I would say one thing I learned from the conversation is basically how to design better, right? And I think I picked that from the I mean, from all through, but then specifically when you talked about the buttons, the one of cancel and sign up, being that your intended destination should be the primary, you should give the primary hierarchy. If I'm going to
yeah.
use that word, that really made some sense to me. Yeah, well, basically, still not
Anyone?
gotten any question in the comments, but I mean, maybe I would just say maybe just share your high points or something as like a feedback if that's fine with Paul too. So anyone up on the speaking party, right? So you could just share one thing you learned, one thing you do better moving forward.
Tell me where I was saying rubbish or. But again, the problem with accessibility is
Yeah,
no
I wanted
visual.
to ask if I could unmute, but like my
Okay, now
network is crazy. I wanted to ask a question.
all right.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, now we cannot hear you because you've muted
All
yourself
right, all right,
again. So,
all right.
all right.
My network is actually on the road, so I wanted
Okay.
to ask. Sorry, Samuel Thomas actually speaking. Um, nice one. Depth explanation. My question is, when you are designing, yeah, for accessibility, for example, there are
Yeah.
lots of things that you should put in place for
Yeah. Sure.
the disabled people. So my question is there a way to design it? Is there like a I know you have mentioned of a plugin to check if a site is accessible, but when you are designing your own, you're working on your own project, you is there a way to make it more easier, the accessibility features, instead of having to design every single accessibility feature on that
No, you
platform?
don't have to. Yeah, so you don't have to design every feature, to be fair. And I get a question, right? You don't have to design every. I mean, it's complex to design every feature, especially when you are not a large team. So when you see people designing or taking account a whole lot of possibilities, because the possibilities can drive you crazy, right? If you go to Wikag's website, I promise you, if you take every day to read, it will take a whole lot of time for you to finish some of these things, because the if this or that, if that or this, if this one has this, and all of that. And we're beginning to see a whole lot more, because there could be an account for someone that is dyslexic and at the same time has a visual problem, right? So you could cover for the dyslexia, but you did not cover for the visual problem. You could cover for someone that probably has an attention disorder and all of a sudden you now realize that, oh, that person has a locomotive problem also and stuff. So the possibilities are endless. You could also have someone that is deaf and dumb and at the same time has some form of visual problem, right? I know. So what you can always do is check for the user group that covers or forms the largest part of your target audience, right? And at least accounts for well above 90%, or at least accounts for say 80% of your user group. If you can go beyond that, and this is not a rule, it's not a rule that you have to account for 80. It's just my personal opinion that if you can account for 80 or more or up to 90%, you would not have so many drop-offs due to accessibility. And if you cannot necessarily design it from scratch by yourself, basically incorporate plugins like um, what we have here at the example I gave. It's called userway.org. That's like one of the most like powerful accessibility plugins out there that could just basically help you put things in place, so you don't have to do all of the work from scratch yourself. They just give you a template that you'd follow to ensure that things work well, right? And then you go through certain checks before your product is live. That's like one of the easiest way. When you're doing your user interviews, think of the possibilities of the users, or when you're doing your user research, think of the possibilities of the user groups that would most likely form part of your users, right? And note them down. Try to talk to people within that category during your user research or user interviews and really get if that is a problem that they would love to make use of, or how they've been solving that kind of problem. Usually, my approach to people is go to the people, live with them, understand the people, start with what they have and what they've been using to solve the problem, right? And then basically build on that progressively to improve the solution for them. Because for every problem you're trying to solve, the people within that category have been solving it already. Or for most problems, because there are problems that the people don't know it is a problem until you bring a solution, right? But in some cases, basically talk to the people and see if it is a problem that they would love for someone to solve, and then solve it and put it in their hands, right? Whether it's a personal project or it's for a company and all of that. And it costs money. So when you're billing for projects, please include money for some of these services, because you are also saving the company or the product money. Alternative at the long run, because when they get a lawsuit, depending on the part of the world they are, but then when they are getting sued for violating certain accessibility rules, they are going to lose way more than the amount of money they would have paid a designer or group of people to basically ensure that it is as accessible as possible. Robinhood had a glitch that was tied to both usability and accessibility at one point in time, that a particular trader, he was a student and was basically trading for people. There was a glitch on the platform, and all of a sudden his balance was reading 0 0. Robinhood is a trading platform. The guy took his life thinking he has lost all the money of the investors that gave him to trade for them, right? And at the end of the day, his family sued the company. They got compensation, shasha, right? Recently, I think I was seeing something. I don't know whether it was on X, but I was reading a news of a particular child that was watching certain videos and went on to prank, and in the process of, more like, it was not necessarily a prank, but got the inspiration to basically stab some of his classmates from watching certain videos, which means that there were no they didn't censor some of the content on those platforms for children, or a child basically got a wrong information or the wrong idea by just watching a video. So it means all of those whole parental control and parental mode are under accessibility features also, while they don't necessarily have to deal with some form of disability. They deal with age bracket and stuff, and that's why you see even movies, they rate movies at a certain age. This is PG-18, this is PG-13, and it's just letting you know that you're not supposed to allow people below that age have access to this content, right? So the boy basically went on to, and I mean, he stabbed like almost 3 or 4 people in school and all of that, simply because he got the idea from a particular video. And the reason why he's able to watch that video is because, oh, there are no features that basically allow parental censoring and then controlling the level of access they have within the platform. So it could go from a glitch that turns your account to 0 0 to life threatening events. If you do that in a medical software, think about the number of people that would die simply because a doctor is seeing the name of a particular drug wrongly, or it was misspelled. Just, it's a spelling error, right? Think about the number of people that will most likely die, or it's a surgical equipment and they were wrongly labeled, and somebody just comes to pick the wrong apparatus and hands it over to a surgeon, and you have a patient that is dying simply because there was a wrong label or wrong name to a particular item, right? So these are some of the reasons why some of these things are just important. And whether it's a personal project or for a company, just ensure that generally you're putting in some of the best practices and you're paying attention to it as close as possible. So yeah.
Yeah. Yep, I'm sure that more than answered that black designer's question. And not to take so much of time, I would want us to wrap it up at that, and then I would want to say a big thank you, Paul. I mean, this was really, what's the word? This was beyond the regular UX session. I mean, this was really insightful, and I think it just justifies the. I earlier said that when you find out that someone works as a freelancer in Toptal, it means it's one of the best of the best, and I think the session really justified that. Thank you for breaking it down so well, so simple and so detailed too. I mean, I learned, and I'm sure a couple of people that came in, dropped off, came in again, maybe due to network issues or time, um, really learned quite a lot.